Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai, and the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nation. Our region is also located on the traditional meeting grounds and traveling route to the Cree Sault peoples. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries, and affirm our commitment to the principles and actions of reconciliation. So I want to introduce you to the leadership for today. And we'll see how this goes. The leadership of your region right now. I am Helen Reid. I am currently the presiding officer of Chinook Winds region, and it is my privilege to lead us through this agenda. Treena Duncan, our executive minister, is sitting right beside me, and she's partnering with me in this task. Dave Pollard is our business convener. Vicki McPhee is our worship convener. Alan Buckingham is the tech guru behind this mess. Hold him in your prayers. Our executive members are Kevin Dorme, Francis Liu, Eric Paget, Alwyn Mabin, Vicki McPhee, Bill Moore, Helen Reid. John Snow and Bob Wallace were also part of the executive, but were unable to continue in their positions because they moved out of the region. Did we see a pretty picture of the executive?
Alan, did you get the photo to put up?
He ran away, didn't he, already?
Okay, well, we can show you the picture later.
So, as we move towards this, we have some greetings that have come to us from our moderator, Richard Bott. There's the executive picture. In the cold, in the snow, all wearing our orange t-shirts or shirts. So let us hear a message of greeting from the moderator of the United Church.
Grace and peace to you in the name of Jesus Christ. For those of you I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Richard Bott. I'm moderator of the United Church of Canada. My pronouns are he and him. I'm speaking to you today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Coquitlam, the Katzie, and the Stolo people. I give thanks to God for the thousands of years of life that they and this land have shared together, for the children, the adults, the elders who continue to be people of this land. An acknowledgement like this, an acknowledgement that I am here as a settler and all of the colonial history that means, must be a call to action, a challenge to myself and to other settler neighbors that we need to work for right relations each and every day. If I don't hear these words as a challenge, then they're just pretty. And we need to be more than pretty words. Especially if we're going to be people of radical inclusion, people who truly welcome others and each other, who welcome all creation as Christ has welcomed each of us. Chinook Winds, what an amazing theme to explore at this regional gathering. I bring you greetings on behalf of the entire United Church, not just the folks who work at the various General Council and Regional Council offices, but all of the United Church communities of faith gathered across the land. I know that we're gathering in this virtual space and that sometimes we can feel more than a bit disconnected. Remember that while it is virtual space, the conversations are real. The worship is real. The relationships are real. And God is real, right with us in this moment. Please know that I am holding you in prayer in your times of learning, discernment, challenge, and celebration. I am certain that you are going to be blessed by the words and the thoughts of the Reverend Dr. Yvette Flunder, and by the work that you do to hold each other and all God's creation in the radical inclusion of Jesus Christ. Peace be with you, Sept.
Thank you to the moderator for coming and joining us and holding us in prayer as we do this meeting in new ways. And I'm so glad I have a partner beside me who just put the mute off. In the name of Jesus Christ, and by the authority of the 2020 General Meeting of Chinook Winds Region of the United Church of Canada, I declare that this meeting is open for the purpose of conducting business properly before us. And so I invite us to join together in worship.
Dave, just while we're waiting, you're unmuted.
And we should see a video coming pretty quick. Oh, Vicki content.
God's presence is with us in all times and in all places. God's presence never leaves us. We live in God's world. Thanks be to God.
Es ist dir gesagt, Mensch, was gut ist und was der Herr von dir fordert, nämlich Gottes Wort halten und Liebe üben und demütig sein vor deinem Gott.
C'est bien d'être ensemble, Dieu. Avec ces gens, ensemble nous écoutons pour votre voix, unis par votre esprit. Dans ce temps de prière, parlez-nous de votre royaume de bonté, afin que nous puissions le chercher. Montrez-nous votre justice. Nous voulons marcher avec vous, humblement, étroitement, quotidiennement. Au nom du Seigneur Jésus-Christ. Amen.
Holy God, we come together as your people, searching for sacred space, longing to be cherished, craving a real connection. In this time together, let thankfulness sink deep and joy spring up. We lift our hearts and souls and minds to the God of our creation, for we are wholly yours, now and forever. Amen.
Thank you.
And so I would like to share with you scripture. Our first scripture comes to us today from Romans chapter 15, verse 7. Therefore, welcome one another. Therefore, just as Christ welcomes you, for the glory of God. We are going to have, instead of a reflection, we are going to invite you to reflect. We have some messages from people who were asked, what does radical inclusion mean for you?
Tatakamani believed the ultimate purpose of humanity was fellowship and brotherhood. Intabjabani, my father, spoke of the great unity in John 10:16, where many sheep are called to Christ's voice and teachings and the global vision of family. For me, radical inclusion was practiced by our people since the time of the missionaries. We welcomed the newcomers and sought fellowship. This exemplifies inclusion as a way of understanding and embrace beyond boundaries, beyond sects, beyond factions, breaking down barriers, utilizing our power and privilege to care for what happens to our fellow human beings, their welfare and their well-being.
Radical inclusion today would include all our friends and neighbors. And I would say, yes, my women's spirit group has met with the Muslim women's spirit group, and I would like to feel that any person could come through the door and feel truly welcomed, not
My name is Pauline from Brooks United Church, Alberta, Canada. I was born and raised in Kenya, East Africa. I moved to Canada a number of years ago. You know, it takes courage to move to a new country because you're leaving your original country, your friends, family, siblings, culture, food, traditions, to come to a new country to embrace new traditions and a new way of life. Being included in society and myself coming to Canada has made me appreciate everyone, and this has given me a whole holistic approach to life, embracing everyone regardless their color or skin or type or wherever they're coming from. We have numerous and various heritages and values that we need to keep and uphold in our lives and in our country. You know, many ethnic and religious groups live and work in Canada. I can never thank my church enough because they keep checking on each other. That's an act of togetherness, as I said, and that makes people feel included in society.
Radical inclusion, that's a tough question because it says a lot. Jesus was a radical, so I think it's following Jesus. You know, I've been a radical all my life. I guess I've been a Jesus follower. You know, yeah, he was a radical. I guess that's the message. You know, that we could be more radical in our not just our thinking, but in what we do. And what we say. It seems to me that we could do a far better outreach to those that are marginalized in our communities. If we're an inclusive church, then we open our doors to everyone, no matter whatever abilities or non-abilities they have. You know, that's the way of Jesus, as far as I know.
I love a good meal, and maybe the two kinds of meals I love the most are the wedding feast, the fancy meal, and then the potluck. Potluck, you bring your best dish, the one that you labor over, the one that you know everyone is going to enjoy. And when you're at a potluck, you see all these different things, and I always think it's kind of rude not to try everything. Maybe that's why I like it the most, but you see the gifts of the people, what they've labored over, and how together you've made this amazing meal. And even if there's too many buns or everybody made chili, it really doesn't matter, because this is a meal that's been prepared together, each with their gifts, everyone bringing their love into this place. You're all in this together, and everyone's welcome, and their gifts are enjoyed and appreciated, even if they're too spicy. And you are a table where everyone has a place.
Alan, can you unmute Vicki, please?
Hi there, I'm unmuted, but I can't get my video to turn on for a minute. So this is Vicki McPhee, and I would like to take this time commute to use these moments, this time of worship, to enter faithfully into a time of theme and into a time of business over the next couple of hours. And may our learning and our discussions be rich and filled with the Holy Spirit this day.
Thanks, Vicki. By the time we get to the end of these 3 days, we're going to be so good at this. We practiced, but you know how it works. So I appreciate the voices that shared with us their vision of radical inclusion, their experience of it, their hope of it, how it looks so different to us. We are going to move into a time of recognizing our retiree. We are grateful for the dedication and the leaders of our church. And today we celebrate the ministry of retiring minister Ross Smilie. And you would have seen the information that was provided in your agenda book about how Ross explains his story. And so I'm going to invite us to listen to Ross again as we hear a video from him, followed by one by our moderator, Richard Bott.
I started out as a lay supply minister in 1981. I was offered a job, kind of out of the blue, actually, as a filling in for a little church that was used to having a summer intern. And this one particular year, for a variety of reasons, they weren't able to get a student from one of the theological colleges, so they were looking for somebody who would fill this in, because the the summer was a really important time in this church's life, and they usually came to life over the summer. They kind of were pretty slow during the winter, and then so they were really looking forward to having their student, and when they didn't get one, they were really disappointed. So they were looking for anyone to come. They were desperate, and that's how they stumbled upon me. And I had no intention of becoming a minister, but they offered me the job. They just wanted someone to do the services on the Sundays and do a little visiting. So I moved up to Pierceland, Saskatchewan, which is part of Cold Lake Pastoral Charge, still is part of Cold Lake Pastoral Charge, I think. And I worked there for 4 months from May through the end of August, and I fell in love with it. And so that was the summer. I think it was the summer of 1981. So then I did lay supply ministries in Drayton Valley and Millwoods United Church at Edmonton, and then I went to theological school for 4 years, including a year-long internship at Canadian Memorial Church in Vancouver. And then I was ordained in 1986. So it's been 34 years as ordained, and a couple of years before that as a student intern and a lay supply minister. I recently also spent quite a bit of time on the story of Moses, and went on way longer than I usually do on the story of Moses, and how, this voice from the burning bush comes to this guy who's caught between the Egyptian culture and the Hebrew culture, and the burning bush, it seems to me, the bush that burns and is not consumed, seems to me a really great metaphor for the challenges of inclusivity, because because racial conflict, ethnic conflict, religious conflict, cultural conflict is the kind of conflict that just goes on and doesn't consume anything. It just keeps going on, and so we need to realize that tension is a really important source, not only of conflict, but also of blessing. And so that's why I think the burning bush, the voice from the burning bush says, Moses, take off your shoes because this is holy ground.
Over the years that I've served in ministry, I've had the chance to watch many of our colleagues as they come to times of retirement. Some have served as ministry personnel for many decades, others for fewer years. Some have been ready to dive into a completely different life and lifestyle, while others have been figuring out how to ease into things. Every time I've had the chance to chat with a minister who is coming to retirement, each person has had a different way of looking back and looking forward. But the one thing that I have seen in each and every one of them has been years of offering their gifts to God's people, the United Church of Canada. For those of you who are retiring now, you are going to be thanked by people who know you far better than I do for all the things that you've shared. But as a colleague, as someone who knows many of the joys and sorrows that ministering with communities of faith can bring into someone's life, I'd like to add my thanks and the thanks of the church in which you have shared God's love in so many ways. While this part of your ministry is coming to an end, the ministry that Christ calls you to of loving God, loving your neighbor as you love yourself, is going to continue. And I look forward to seeing what that new ministry, what this new life is going to call into being. please know that you are held not only in God's love, but all of our love, each and every day. Congratulations.
Ross, Chinook Winds Region offers you gratitude for your dedication and contribution to the church and the people you have served. May you continue to live your faith with joy and laughter as the Spirit moves you into this new time of your living. Amen. And so we are doing this new thing in new ways, but there are some things that still need to be done, business stuff that has to happen. And so I'm going to invite Dave Pollard to take us on a quick little tour about what we are going to do and how we are going to do it.
Thank you so much, Helen. It's good to be with everyone in this virtual space. I would like to very quickly just kind of give you a bit of an orientation and then move order paper number 1, which is going to constitute the court. So we have some tasks to do. We have some nominations that we'll have to approve, and we have we'll have a remit that we have to vote on. And then, we have some meeting flow things to talk about. But I think the best way to do this would be to move order paper number 1, and Alan is going to screen share that because some things in the order paper will become evident as we talk about it. There's a couple of things in red that I kind of want to talk through to help folks out. And we recognize that just over a year ago, we built a regional council in the opening motions of our gathering in Lethbridge. That constituted the court and executive, put structure in what had been dreamed and talked about as we moved from an old way of being into a new. And now, just a little over a year later, we have a whole nother way of having to do things. And we recognize that that can be a cause for uncertainty for some, and a cause for anxiety for some. But the mantra that I've had with my folks that I serve here in Medicine Hat has been since March, grace upon grace, upon grace, upon grace, upon love. And we need to recognize that some of us are adept and adroit at these new technological wonders, and some of us have to have some things explained or come alongside with, and we trust that our friends and our neighbors will do that with us in community. And so I want to move this order paper and then go back and explain a couple of things. So I would move order paper number 1 and would invite Myeon Kim to be the seconder for this. And order paper number 1 reads, constituting the court, be it resolved that the general meeting of the Chinook Winds Regional Council be held on 15th September to 17th September 2020 using the Whova app. The goals of this meeting shall be making connections, nominating executive and committee members, approving and enabling the faithful work of the church in the region moving forward. That the bar of council be established as the Zoom portion embedded in the Whova app, recognizing we have the ability to speak and be heard and test the will of the court in a fulsome manner. That Helen Reed, presiding elder, and Kathy Yamashita, recording secretary for this meeting, be affirmed in their roles for this meeting. Regional council staff, general council guests, candidates for ministry not in appointment, and speakers and presenters be appointed as corresponding members of the court. That Alan Buckingham be empowered to tabulate and report results of votes to the business committee chair. Also, be it resolved that the reports distributed in the agenda book, the interim financial reports, and the report of the nomination committee be received for information. That nomination for Chinook Winds Regional Council Executive and all committees close at 4:30 Mountain Daylight Time, September 15, 2020. That new business be presented to the Business Committee in writing, who will recommend appropriate action to the court. The Business Committee is available remotely. That unfinished business be referred to the Chinook Winds Regional Council Executive, and that the Executive Minister is invited to hear the intent of the court and ensure the minutes of the general meeting and forthcoming policies of the region reflect the will of the court. Now, I just want to go back and talk about those items in red. The first one being the bar of conference. Now, I invite you to think of yourself that we have gathered in a hotel, for example, and we are all here in the hotel, which is the Whova app. The bar of conference, the legal place where our meeting and discussions are happening, are in fact a room within that hotel, and that room is the Zoom portion of the app that we're all talking in right now. If you want to think about some of the other capabilities of Whova, like the meetups as maybe the place where we'd eat supper, or some other places might be the bathrooms, that we're all in a space together, but the actual place where decisions are made are over the Zoom function, where we can talk to each other and hear each other, and also poll the will of the court. So take note of that, and that might be helpful for some of you to think of your experience a year ago in Lethbridge. We all met in the hall in Lethbridge, and that's where we conducted our business, and then we went out and we had a great time at McKillop doing various other things, going to the exhibitors and things like that, and also worship in the sanctuary. But the business happens here in the Zoom modality that we have. Now, the last piece, we are very tempted all the time as church people, as some of you more than others, and I don't want to point out anybody because I sometimes have a bad habit as well, of wanting to take every single proposal and parse every word that is in the proposal that is there for you all to look at. The last point of the organizing business section allows our executive minister, who is wonderful, capable, and excellent at listening to all of you and the debate and the discussion, and making sure that when the minutes are edited, when the policies are drafted, she will remind the executive, and frequently does, of the intent of the annual meeting and the court. In our new structure, we have to have a level of trust in our staff and in our collective ability to let someone else do work that is not necessarily onerous, but difficult sometimes to do in large groups. And I know that's a learning and a letting go for some people, but this particular part of this motion I put in to signal that, we want to talk about mission, we want to talk about priorities, we don't want to talk about commas and just a discussion of syntax. So I hope that's helpful, especially in a platform like this. We want to talk about big ideas, dreams. Of course, we want to talk a little bit about the minutia, but we don't want to get caught up in it. And that's why we have Treena, because she's about being caught up in the minutia, right? Okay, so that is the order paper number 1. And maybe Helen, if we could have the question on that, if there are any folks who want to offer a comment or a question, this would be the time to do that. And then we can just talk generally about what's going to be happening tomorrow in the next couple of days. Are you there, Helen?
Helen is just unmuting herself here. She's having a little challenge.
Okay.
Okay, here, go ahead.
Okay, we're going to try this slightly differently. Alan, it says that you have taken control of me. You might want to let that go. So I am looking for a motion to accept order paper number 1.
Actually,
Dave,
Helen,
are you moving that?
Helen, 1 second. Before we do that, I'm going to move it. Mion's going to second it. But we should have our test poll before we actually do a poll. My apologies, people. Just think, we learn dots, we can learn this. All right. We have a test poll question. So what's going to happen for our when it comes time to vote? The chair of the business committee, myself, or the presiding officer, or you all will ask for the question. At which time Helen will pose the question, and the polls will be open. Now, Alan can come on and tell us a little about how that's going to happen. It pops up in your messages, it pops up in your email, and you can respond. So Alan has a test poll for us to go through, and then we'll come right back once we've all done that swimmingly and wonderfully, recognizing that there's anxiety around this, and then we will be able to approve the order paper and be off to the races. Amen?
Sure.
So Alan, if you would be so kind as to talk about polling in Hoover.
Perfect. I did just send out a poll. So if you're on your computer in the web browser, on the left-hand side, you should have received a notification in messages. And sometimes you get to see, it will say polls, but not always. I don't understand why. But if you click on the messages, it will say polls from Chinook Winds Regional Council. And then there should be a poll there. Do you prefer bananas or artichokes? And if you could all please respond to that poll. On my mobile version, I need to...
Alan, can I just add that if you're on the computer, it's possible that you'll get bumped out of the meeting when you go to vote. If you do, just vote and then click the button that gives you the option to rejoin. And you should be able to get back in very quickly.
Thank you. And on your mobile version, you do also need to leave the session, I believe, actually, unfortunately, to get to your poll. No, I'm not finding it useful. And you can go onto your home screen, and then it will say polls, and you can click on the poll and answer it. Do you prefer bananas or artichokes? And then you just pop back into your session. If you get a notification on your mobile device, it's much easier, and you're lucky. And I appreciate you just swiping down and hitting your poll that way. Beautiful. I got 82 responses so far.
Can I just add that if you're having trouble finding the poll, if you don't see the word poll, you might see messages with a red circle and a 1 beside it. That is where you will find the poll. And if you don't see either of those things, try refreshing your screen.
Also, my understanding is that the poll will also come to you via the email that you registered at, so you'll get it all kinds of ways. The beauty of this, I have a laptop going, I have an iPad and an iPhone. I voted on my laptop and my vote was recorded, but it won't let me vote now that I voted on my iPhone or my iPad. It will only let us vote once on whatever device that we've originally voted on. So you can vote via email and still be in the Hoover app, and it will be recorded once.
And you may not get the email for this one. I am not positive that I clicked that button, but I'm checking up all my other ones and making sure that I clicked it so the email comes when we do the rest of them. So don't panic if you're not getting it this time.
So we're getting up there. If you're having extreme difficulty, please engage in the chat, either the Zoom chat where we are here or the Whova chat. Chris and Mauricio are monitoring those. So just type a little note saying SOS, help, 911, some kind of something or other. Because I see on my poll that we're getting up to around 104 and there's 170 some of us here. So we'd like you to vote so that we know we're getting everybody. And that's important because that's what we're here for, right? We're here for theme, we're here for worship, we're here for conducting the work of the church.
If the folks that signed in directly on Zoom are able to keep their Whova going just for the purposes of voting, that would be very helpful.
And as I mentioned, I don't think I set the, so you can see the results so far. I don't think I set the to the email, but you should be able to check your email for the next poll, and then it's just a link to click. So, and I can close the poll whenever you want, Dave. I don't know that we're going to hit everybody.
Okay, as long as we get a plurality, for the enabling motion, and we can work on making sure that folks are moving along. We've got 87%, 107, so that's 50%, and bananas are winning far and away. So
yeah, I'm pretty disappointed by that, I must say, but
there you go. All right, so you can just close that poll. And Helen, if you would then call the question on the order paper moved by myself and seconded by me on Kim, that would be great. And if you have questions about the order paper, raise them in chat or put up your hand in the Zoom link, and we can Zoom chat, and we can find out what your question is.
So we have a motion on the floor from Dave Pollard and Young King that we have. No.
That order paper number 1 be approved.
That order paper number 1 be approved. So, does anybody have any other questions, not on the voting process right now, but on order paper number 1? I would ask that you put your questions in the chat. Okay.
Sam Grottenberg has a question, so please, Sam, go ahead, type quickly. Or if we could unmute Sam, if that's possible.
Chris, could you email the order paper to Susan Lukey, please?
I know this is crazy, people, and I so appreciate your patience and asking the questions, because we're learning all together. Our nominations close at 4:30 today. There was a little bit of a miscommunication that went out, but 4:30 is when we are closing nominations today.
Hey, I think I was unmuted. Is that right?
There you are. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I was trying to type fast, but just a question. Helen, your title in the order paper is listed as presiding elder, and I recall a conversation last spring that we had agreed on presiding officer for a number of reasons. Is that correct?
That is
correct. Well done.
Okay.
Let me change that. My apologies, Sam. Good catch.
No worries.
Chris did mention that the order paper was emailed out through the Chinook Winds email list. So if you want to take a look at that in more detail, you should be able to do that.
By checking your email.
Yep. If folks want an email copy of the order paper again, they can do so by emailing me, and I'll put my email in the chat.
And I will point out quickly, there are some people who are registered and not to vote who did get the poll on the artichokes and bananas. And that is true. I let you vote on artichokes or bananas, but I am not letting you vote on the order paper. Don't worry.
So I'm just waiting to give you a chance. If you're getting this via email, I just want to give those people a chance to take a look at it.
You can't. Ed?
Dave, I'm wondering if I can get you to read through this just one more time, a little bit slower, so that we can ensure that everybody hears the words.
Sure,
And,
I can.
That would be lovely.
You betcha. So order paper number 1 reads, be it resolved that the general meeting of the Chinook Winds Regional Council be held on September 15th to 17th, 2020, using the Whova app. The goals of this meeting shall be making connections, nominating executive and committee members, approving and enabling the faithful work of the church in the region moving forward. At the Bar of Council be established as the Zoom portion embedded in the Whova app, recognizing we have the ability to speak, be heard, and test the will of the court in a fulsome manner. That Helen Reed, presiding officer, and Kathy Yamashita, recording secretary for this meeting, be affirmed in their roles. Regional council staff, general council guests, candidates for ministry not in appointment, and speakers and presenters be appointed as corresponding members of the court. That Alan Buckingham be empowered to tabulate and report the results of votes to the business committee chair. Also be it resolved that the reports distributed in the agenda booklet, the interim financial reports, and the report of the nomination committee be received for information. Nomination for Chinook Winds Regional Council Executive and all committees close at 4:30 Mountain Daylight Time, September 15, 2020. New business be presented to the business committee in writing, who will recommend appropriate action to the court. The business committee is available remotely. That unfinished business be referred to the Chinook Winds Regional Council Executive, and that the executive minister is invited to hear the intent of the court and to ensure the minutes of the general meeting and forthcoming policy of the region reflect the will of the court. Moved by myself, seconded by Myeon Kim.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
There is a link posted in the chat for the order paper. If you want to get it, that will be the best way. Just open it in a new tab, and that way you'll be able to not get kicked out of the meeting.
Not seeing any other questions. I would like to call this question. Alan, are we going to do this in a vote?
Yes, I just sent the poll. I did click the send by email as well. So you should also get an email if you are a ministry personnel or retired ministry personnel and elected lay representatives.
So we're going to go into messages. We're going to find our poll question, do our thing, and then come back. Go.
Alan, have you posted the poll yet?
Yes, I did send the poll. We have 57 responses so far.
Okay.
We do have a question from Sharon Woodhouse. Dave, do you want to take that? You're still muted, Dave. I'm going to let Sharon unmute herself if that's okay with you.
Okay. Go ahead, Sharon.
I can't seem to, I saw the order and I read it and I heard it, but I don't, my screen is just a Zoom screen. I have no place to put my answer. So can I just raise my hand in the participants part where it says, you know, raise hand? Will that count as a vote?
I would have to defer to Treena on that question.
So let's say yes. And if we end up in a situation where that would have a material impact on the outcome, then we would probably have to deal with that. But for this purposes, I think it's okay.
Okay,
Right.
great.
Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Sharon.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right. I'm not seeing the poll on my screen, Alan, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. How many responses do we have thus far?
97, all 97? Of which are in favor.
Which are in favor, okay.
I can put up the poll and it'll count it up as it goes if you want.
That would be great, because that would give me a chance to see where we're at, because I think we'll probably keep the polls open just a little bit longer.
Dave said he didn't get it. Helen didn't get it either, Alan. I'm not sure if the leadership team got left out or something. Oh, it's there now. Okay. So maybe refresh your screen if you didn't get the poll, because sometimes that is necessary.
I have it on the email now. Okay, good. See, this will work. We just might have to keep the voting open a little longer because, you know, dots and how fun that was last year, right? There you go. So you should get mine.
And it is lovely that we can do this with a concrete way and the different methodologies, and we do have to live with everybody's different technology and how they all update or not and refresh or not. So we do, once again, thank you for your patience.
Indeed, we do. Now, as I'm looking at the votes that are coming up on the screen that I'm seeing, 106 votes, there were 177 people. Helen, I believe that's a plurality, 182 people. So that's a plurality, and I certainly think that, I don't want to put words in the mouth of the chair, but you know, we could perhaps declare the motion approved, passed.
Yes.
I have 5 people that replied yes to me in my email as well, so there's a few more.
There you go.
Okay.
Are we
and a couple more in the chat. So.
Oh, great. Well, there you go.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I appreciate everyone's creativity.
We want to make sure the voices get heard. So I understand that the numbers are there, but we're going to have to find a way to make sure all the voices get heard.
We definitely would encourage you, if you have a strong opposition to a vote and you find that you're unable to vote, to please share that concern with us in such a way that we can be aware of it, and then we can consider how to address that. Again, we really appreciate your patience and understanding where this is sort of a learning for all of us. And, you know, we're trying to keep the business to a minimum because we recognize the challenges of doing this kind of work in this online forum. Mm-hmm. So thanks for your patience.
Great. And so the 911, if there's a vote being called and you're not registering your vote and you have a serious concern, please in the chat, but the quickest way, 403-458-3224. Take your pens out, 403-458-3224. I will get that phone call, and we will catch whatever flag on the field to try to real time hear your concern or register your opposition. Okay? So just to wrap up, tomorrow we are going to be hearing the report of the nominating committee. We're going to be hearing an introduction to the remit. There is already some background documentation if you want to read about the remit that we're going to be looking at. The question was sent out. Thank you to Mauricio for doing that with your agenda package and a few other things. And then if you have a burning desire to try to get a proposal on, there's a jot form that's part of the agenda book, but we'll have to see what comes. I don't think there's anything more that I need to say at the moment, but again, what I said about grace upon grace upon grace, and just living into the moment. I recognize some people are having problems with audio. I recognize some people are not necessarily getting the polling information, but we're going to do the best we can because that's what we're called to do. And we're going to trust in the Spirit, because ultimately what you're going to remember is a bit of the business, maybe. Maybe I'll remember my bow tie. I don't know. But you will remember the theme and the worship, which were already well and truly fed today. Lots of good questions popping up from our worship we just had. So I'm going to turn things back to our wonderful, fantastic presiding officer and to Treena, and they will continue on with the agenda. Thank you, folks.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So I'm just going to take, we're running really close to where we should be, and I really appreciate that. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes of your time, because those people who put this schedule together seem to think that I should say something to you. So here we go. The United Church was born of a vision of different people coming together to live out the gospel news of God's love in the world. And there are times when we still struggle, as those founders must have done, to learn to do things differently, to consult with one another, to share resources and stories, to recognize that as God's church, we are more than our individual congregations. Culturally, we have been taught to look after ourselves. Scripturally, we are taught to look after everyone else. Even though the whole prospect of regions was exciting to me, because I saw the potential of sharing resources and stories and support with more people, because I truly believe in teamwork to achieve God's goal of bringing out the best of everyone now, I will admit to being a little bit scared that we would not rise to the challenge. We were comfortable in our familiar presbyteries. Not everyone was ready to let go of their own piece of the world to dive into doing things differently, with new partners, with enthusiasm. We were scared of the something new that was coming. Not knowing made us uneasy, and our beginning may have looked a little bit bumpy. But in these months of our new beginning, I have been so proud of what you have accomplished. Our staff have learned new things, created new things, recognized other layers of change that were needed, turned where turning was needed, and they have given us such energy, guidance, and challenge. Volunteers came forward to fill up the teams that we needed to support the work of the staff. You came to Zoom conversations, and here you are in Hoover. As we looked for ways to connect when we couldn't meet face to face, you joined online for conversations and learning opportunities. Ministers came to their conversations offering each other empathy and courage. And everyone came to the online town hall where we kept up to date on changing circumstances. And we found that we were all confused and creating together. It hasn't all been easy, and it's not perfect. There have been times when the answers we've received have not been the ones we wanted. There are times when we have just been a little bit impatient with each other. And some of us have come to the familiar end of our familiar faith story, but in so many creative ways, new chapters are being written, new partnerships begun, new passions and compassions are coming forward. We are coming together as a strong region. We are hearing the voices of those who need us to see them, to hear them, to create this strong thing together. We are living hope together. Do not lose this momentum. Continue to connect, to listen, to learn to lean into the warm Chinook wind of faith that swirls around us, among us, and within us. Be the fierce love the world needs. Love your neighbor with every fiber of your being, and let the reputation of this region be one of all God's people together. God knows we can do this. God is with us on this new and unfolding journey. We are not alone. We never were. Thanks be to God. And so we come to a time when we are going to explore this radical inclusion that we are living into. And so I'm going to invite Treena to introduce us to our speaker.
Hi, everyone, and thanks again for hanging in there with us. We know that the technology can be challenging, and we know that we're all grieving what might have been had we been able to gather in person. But one of the things that as I mentioned to those of you who are gathering in the pre-meeting time, we're so incredibly blessed, and partly it's a gift of the COVID pandemic because it made technology made it possible for us to bring Bishop Flunder to be with you today. When we were planning the meeting, we really wanted to think about what was the purpose of our time together. Why are we coming together? And one of the reasons that we're coming together is recognizing that we've all been challenged these last 6 months, and that now is an opportunity for us to fill up our cups a little bit. So to come together and be filled with an experience of learning together and an experience of engaging together to consider how we as a region want to be the church together. So we came up with the idea of the theme of radical inclusion, and as someone new to this region, I have to say that the Chinook Winds region really is gifted with the capacity for hospitality and inclusion. I can't say how much of a warm welcome I've received in my time here, and I know that that is a core value of this region. So when we decided to focus on the idea of radical inclusion, it was divine coincidence to discover that Bishop Flunder is an expert in this area. She's written a book with that in its title. Bishop Flunder is from San Francisco. She's a preacher, she's a singer, she's got ties with our sister church, the United Church of Christ. She's ordained through the United Church of Christ. She has a master's and a doctorate in ministry from the Pacific School of Religion. And she is presently leading the City of Refuge ministry in San Francisco. We are so grateful, Bishop Flunder, for your willingness to be with us over these 3 days. And we know we will be blessed with your presence. And so with no further ado, we invite Bishop Flunder to begin her time with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Treena. I trust that I am properly unmuted. Thank you.
You are indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I thank you again for the invitation, and to all of our kindred and our colleagues in the Chinook Winds region and of the United Church of Canada. What a joy. We've spent quite a bit of time in Canada serving and preaching and teaching here and there over the years. And it is a great joy for me to be able to share with you. I want to share today from some passages of scripture that I believe will be helpful. And I'll read the passage as we go a little further in our conversation today. But I've asked the question, what is radical inclusion? And then somewhat answered it from Acts 9. When inclusion includes ministry to your enemy. And let me begin by saying, we in the United States and in many parts of the world are currently navigating a bifurcated political system where each player believes they or we are right and perhaps tolerant, or perhaps will not hear anything that moves us from our place and our position. And if we listen to everyone's argument and justification, it becomes increasingly difficult to see and hear common themes beyond our preconceived notions of who and what is right and who and what is wrong. And of course, this doesn't happen in Canada, but it is our daily bread here presently in the United States. I call it us and themness. Us and themness. This was because the principal justification for the violence, for instance, at 9/11, the bombing in Afghanistan and Iran, the proliferation of weapons in our nation, more than any nation that we know of, frankly, the anti-peace positions of the United States at the UN. We are now in the mask or no mask realities, eco-justice or junk science realities, Black Lives Matter or not, LGBTQI inclusion or not. And there are leaders in our world who believe, frankly, they can do no wrong. So consequently, whatever they do is right. And often those of us who are predictably intractable and inflexible have come to this place impacted by tradition, privilege, religious belief, and often we're informed by nationalistic, cultural, elitist training and tradition, steeped in a sense of having a right to always have it right, whatever the it actually is. I hear it often in the deep divide in all things political, and the offspring of the marginalized and the offspring of those who have historically been oppressors struggle to find a path where we can genuinely come together. Many find security in their positions from history and patterns of behavior, institutionalized and sanctified by time and practice. People say often, this is the way my folks did it. And there's something powerful when we do things the way our folks did it, even if the way our folks did it caused a trail of tears for others. Being part of a greater whole with set rules, while comforting, is often an enemy to change. I'll say that again. Being part of a greater whole with set and fixed rules, while comforting, while secure, is often an enemy to change. When Jesus spoke new doctrines and gave meaning to the empty legalisms of his time by saying things like, you've heard it said of old, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say, love them that hate you. It upset the religious status quo to the point of violence against him. In fact, Jesus and Paul and John, James and their followers were writing the book of Acts with their lives. And I would like to believe, my beloved, today, that we are writing Acts 2 with ours. And perhaps long after we have left the earth plane, someone will write something and canonize it about the radical inclusion in Canada through the Chinook winds region. Saul, who became Paul, we know him, was caught up in this kind of maelstrom, this change on his way to Damascus to dismantle and perhaps to kill the followers of this new way started by Yeshua ben Yosef, Jesus, the brown Palestinian Jew who broke with both the Roman Empire and the priesthood of Judaism. He was in trouble with the state and the church at the same time. And his followers were in Damascus. And Saul had papers from the leadership of the Jewish Sanhedrin to go and put a stop to this new thing called the way. These, the first Christians. In order to become a true agent for change, there are things that must shift in our lives. And let me say, and we have to prepare to walk with those whose shift takes more time, perhaps, than ours does. Because shift happens, but shift sometimes takes time. And so let's set the stage before we have our conversation. In Acts 9, let's set the stage for the confrontation between Saul, who became Paul, and Ananias. Acts 9 says, meanwhile, Saul was still spewing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest seeking letters to the synagogues in Damascus. And if he found persons who belonged to the way, whether men or women, these letters would authorize him to take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. And during the journey, as he approached Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven encircled him, and he fell to the ground, and he heard a voice asking him, Saul, Saul, why are you harassing me? Saul said, and who are you, Lord? And the voice said, I am Jesus, whom you are harassing. Now get up, enter the city, and you will be told what you must do. Those traveling with him stood there speechless. They heard the voice, but they saw no one. After they picked Saul up from the ground, he opened his eyes, but he could not see. So they led him by the hand into Damascus, and for 3 days he was blind, and he neither ate nor drank anything. And then in Damascus, there was a certain disciple named Ananias. And the Lord spoke to him through a vision, Ananias, and he answered, yes, Lord. And the Lord instructed him, go to Judas' house on Straight Street. Ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul. He is praying. And in a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias enter and put his hands on him and restore his sight. But listen to Ananias. Ananias countered and said, Lord, I have heard many reports about this man. People say he has done horrible things to your holy people in Jerusalem. He is here with authority from the chief priest to arrest everyone who calls on your name. But the Lord said, go. This man is the agent I have chosen to carry my name before the Gentiles and the kings and the Israelites. Essentially, he's had something to do with all of these populations. And I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. And Ananias placed his hands on Saul. He said, Saul, the Lord sent me, and Jesus, who appeared to you on the way, sent me so that you could see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And the flakes fell from his eyes. He got up, he was baptized. They fixed him food, he regained his strength, and he stayed with them for several days. And he began to preach, and he began to teach. And they were baffled by him. Isn't he the one who was wreaking havoc? Isn't he the one? But he grew stronger and stronger and stronger. Beloved, real change does not take place anywhere in our world or in our lives without some form of confrontation, conciliation, and reconciliation. We fear change because we do not enjoy the possible mutuality that may come from it when we really sit down at the table and begin to share back and forth until we get beyond the things that divide us. You cannot expect to come away from a true confrontation peacefully without having to compromise or negotiate something. Hallelujah. Most of us want to fight where we know going in that we're going to win. That's the kind of fight we want to have. We know that we are absolutely right in every conceivable way. And even though we may be tolerant, the other people are just wrong. You are not having a confrontation when you're standing over an errant child with a possible weapon of mass destruction in your hand and saying, today, young one, we are going to clear up this I won't make up my bed behavior. That is not a confrontation. It is a confrontation when there is a degree of vulnerability and mutuality. Vulnerability often scares us. We've got to come correct to leave correct. And we will not settle disputes with word tricks. We won't settle disputes with pretending to accept what we cannot accept. We won't settle disputes if we are not hearing each other, not just with our ears, but hearing with our hearts. Paul needed to reassign his negative intention, by the way, not his passion. He needed to reassign his negative intention, his poor theology perhaps, but not his passion. He did not know how to do that, by the way. He was a Pharisee and a keeper and a defender of the law and the traditions. I'm sure you don't have those in Canada, but we do in the United States. The keeper and defenders of the law and tradition. And then he had orders from headquarters. He had participated in the stoning of others and felt it was just and right. And now he was being called by the light of God to completely change his path, to shift his trajectory. He is being called to embrace those he had come to kill. But in order for this to happen, there needed to be this enlightenment. This is the enlightenment that caused Saul to become Paul. This is the enlightenment that would return to him what was taken from him on the Damascus road. He had to come face to face with Ananias. Why? Because it takes an Ananias to make a Paul out of a Saul. Transparency. We fear pressing for collaboration sometimes with established institutional thinking because it puts us and all of our stuff on Front Street. Sometimes we have lived under laws and lived under rules and lived under plans and lived under the discipline of those plans so long until those things have become religion for us. But collaboration and working with one another brings to the front or on Front Street everything that we truly are and believe. The deeper I get to know you, the more I can be delivered from misrepresenting you and not understanding you. Exposure does not stop where we put up boundaries. If you are in a glass house, everything is open to view. And that's why transparency is required. And transparency requires courage. And transparency requires power. Transparency is the antithesis of fear. Let me say it to you this way, my beloved. I have struggled with being the only woman preacher in a pulpit of men whose breathing changed when they saw me. And I particularly had this experience in predominantly African-American churches. I have struggled with the outcomes of sharing my truth as a same-gender loving woman. I have struggled with being the token Black on boards and councils who made decisions, by the way, at the pre-meeting over drinks. My truth is, I don't like Ananias' work either. And I probably would have sat back and said to Jesus, when Jesus spoke to me, I really do wish that you would pass this on to somebody else. I actually prefer my community of comfort. I prefer my community that knows how to fry chicken and make sweet potato pie. I prefer my community of heritage. I prefer that community. But you're tasking me now to connect with and be a part of and be integral in and be authentic in communities and among people and among folks who are so different. And then you're asking me to go there and work with Saul. And every Saul system needs an Ananias. Every Saul system needs an Ananias that will know that Saul is problematic, but will walk with Paul and Saul until Saul is delivered into Paul, and Paul becomes the greatest writer, the greatest personality, the greatest contributor to the whole New Testament. It takes an Ananias that is called to make change happen. And I'll close with this. It is time for transformation, to be radically inclusive, to move toward extravagant grace and relentless hospitality is not reshuffling of the same cards, but it may call for an entirely new game. Not a rearrangement of deck chairs on the Titanic, not just moving furniture around on a doomed ship. Real change is sometimes abrupt and often total. Whether it is a change of direction, a change of mind, or locations, or priorities, it's when a group of people are very clear that we've done the same thing and we've done it so long it's become religion to us, but it was wrong really in some ways from the beginning. And when the change of direction says, this is enough, it makes some of us very frustrated. But remember this, Paul was on his way to kill, to render and to disable the people in Damascus. He met with and agreed with Jesus, and his whole life plan was changed as the result of one donkey ride. Change me, God, because I'm ready to change. Someone says I'm too old to change. No, there's no such thing as too old. There are some things that some of us in our shifting and changing will begin that we will not live to complete, but change anyway. I can imagine what the hubbub was in Jerusalem when they got the news. When the high priest found out that the person that they dispatched to put an end to the work in Damascus had joined the work in Damascus. I'm sure someone said, well, he needs to come back and explain what has happened. Well, he was never able to go back like he was when he left. Neither will we be able to go back to who we were when we leave. Forgetting those things which are behind takes courage. It's also uncomfortable. It's also set up so we cannot really see where we are going. And there's a song that says there is no map for where we are going, but we are not lost. My grandmother used to say, when I used to complain if we were not going to make it to an event, Grandma, we need to call them and tell them that we're not coming. She used to say, they'll know you're not coming when they don't see you. There are some folks who are used to seeing us be a certain way that will be disappointed by our shift and by our change. But the Spirit of God has taken hold of this atmosphere. We changed from face-to-face meetings to Zoom meetings. We changed from correspondence, writing letters, to writing emails. We've shifted from going across the Atlantic in ships to flying across the Atlantic in planes. Change is possible and change is necessary. It will take real dedication, my beloved, and commitment to craft an authentic welcome and a listening process that hears the stuck and the unstuck, that hears the young and the old, that hears the traditionalists, and hears the Black Lives Matter protests in the street. Properly focused and equally as passionate must be our passion for serving one another. People do change, most often when they are heard. Peace will never be achieved apart from some real human exchanges. Great service to justice and great authentic service to peace seeks everyone. I welcome you to radical, holy, power-filled confrontation, negotiation, peace, and inclusion. God bless you is my prayer.
Thank you, Yvette. I wonder if you're okay with some questions at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
Great. So folks, if you have some questions for Bishop Flunder, we would love to engage some conversation with you and with her. I don't know if you're able to see the chat yourself, but there's just an amazing response in there about the power of your words and the way in which they're landing for folks.
I do see it.
Great.
I'm very open to questions.
We'll just give folks a moment just to settle into your words. I think they're so powerful that that people just need a minute. So there's a question from Joanne. I'm not sure if you're seeing that one. What do you do when they accuse you of selling out when you, it's cut off for me, something across
when you reach
divisions?
across divisions.
Yes.
Thank you.
What do you do when they accuse you of selling out when you reach across divisions? I often use the realities of marriage and relationships. Those of you that have had or are engaged in or hope to be engaged in a long-term relationship do understand that we come into relationships with our own ideas, especially when we're good and grown when we come in. And we have a belief about how things should go, like where towels should go and what side of the bed certain things should be on, and whether or not milk should be on the door of the refrigerator or inside the refrigerator. You know, these are life-affecting decisions that have to be made. And whether or not the toilet paper should come forward or come backward, or the toothpaste should be squeezed from the middle of the tube or from the bottom. And when you get involved in a long-term relationship, what ends up happening is there are ways of compromise. And the ways of compromise most occur when we are able to, first of all, pull ourselves back from the things that really don't matter so much. Really, what does it matter whether the toilet paper comes to the front or comes to the back? How much does it matter whether the toothpaste is squeezed from the middle or from the bottom? I think the first thing we have to, if we are genuinely going to get together and really be together and open ourselves to one another, is worry a lot less about the opinions of people. Those opinions that say that if you are in the process of peace, if you come and you lay all of your weapons down for the conversation, that you have weakened yourself or weakened your position. I believe that all positions have to come into the circle. And then we have to together determine which ones of them we're going to take away. Otherwise, all we are doing is waiting for other people to finish talking so we can get our opinion back in there again. That is not the real way to find reconciliation, to seek change, to move forward. I would encourage us, give some thought. Give some thought. Other questions?
There's a question there in the Zoom chat. Inclusion assumes presence. How do we bring about reconciliation when you struggle to achieve participation on all sides of the issue? And what does true community reconciliation look like?
It's a powerful statement. And inclusion does assume presence. Physically, technologically, how about that? And authentically. There are times when I'm teaching that I say to an audience, if that audience is particularly people of European descent, I will say to them, as long as I choose to objectify you, and that is my own choice, by the way. If I choose to objectify you, what does that mean? I say it this way, you know how white people are. They're all like that. You know how men are. You know how they are. As long as I can put enough distance between you and I can come to those conclusions and empower myself in that place. But what I often do in those settings, when we could touch one another, I'll go and get myself a man of European descent, quite unknowing that I was going to do that to him, and bring him to me. And then put my arms around him and hold on to him until I can feel his heart beat in my chest and he can feel my heartbeat in his. And the reason that I use that as a demonstration is because as long as I keep him across the room, I can objectify him. When I get involved with him, if I come close to him, essentially when we begin to find ourselves doing common work together, I find out some things about his heartbeat and he finds out some things about mine. I think what we have to do is be very intentional to find common causes and reasons to work together. And when we are in the process of lifting up those that we both know have been marginalized and objectified and criminalized, when we do that work together, we will find our way to the connecting points that call for and will allow for radical inclusion. You see, if we're not radically including, it's going to be really hard for us to go out and do the work of justice in the world. We got to get past the things that are the barriers for us. And I got to hold on to this guy. I got to hold on to him in my mind and in my heart, because I have not been treated essentially any worse by any population of people than I have European males. There's not a population that has treated me any worse than that population, historically, and in some ways, currently. But at the same time, some of my best friends in the world are white guys. And that's the truth. And I know them and I feel them and they know me and they feel me because we worked through it. And we found our way to our common denominator. They didn't choose their ancestors and I didn't choose mine. But we have the opportunity to change the entire trajectory of what happens from this time going forward. Hallelujah.
And amen. Trevor Potter says, so we live in a subject to subject relationship. Do you feel the contemplative tradition of our Christian lineage can help us prepare for this work?
I think that the contemplative tradition of all of our faith paths not just our Christian lineage, can help us in this work. And yes, the same Christian lineage that we connect to, that I connect to, was the Christian lineage that created chattel slavery for my ancestors. And the part of me that is Native American, that was on long death walks. And I say that to you because I have known my own Christian lineage to be filled with incredible prejudice and wickedness and evil. And so I encourage us to connect, yes, to the contemplative parts of our lineage as Christians, but I suggest that we also reach back for some of the things that have been vilified and demonized by that lineage. Our native realities, our African realities, our homeland, and whatever our homeland was, as far back as spirit will move us. That 12% of me is Irish. And so I have a Celtic drum down in there too. What is important, however, is that we find the common denominators and we connect. Some of the same ways of destruction existed for all of those realities, but some of the same ways of peace and power and spirituality also existed. And may I say it in the colloquial way that I would say it, I want all my stuff back. I want all of the good and all of the God and all of the holy and all of the peace and all of the power that runs in my veins, in my heart, in my mind. I want those things to become superior in many ways to the negativity and in some ways the pain, not all of the pain. I need some of it always to be able to connect with those who have pain, but enough of the pain such that the pain itself does not become an altar, a God. We have to be able to move together in some way. That's the only way that the earth will have peace. So I love contemplation, but let's go deeper, even than our Christian history, our Christian connections, and find the God and the good in those things as well.
Thank you. Next question from Sharon Woodhouse. What if you wrong someone and realize your mistake, but the wrong person refuses to forgive? How long do you keep asking?
Oh, what an incredible question. I don't think that the responsibility continues to be yours when you've asked. The next step after asking forgiveness for something that you have done or someone that you have wronged is to ensure by your going forward that you not make that error again. That's the greatest tribute you can pay to that experience. What I have learned, beloved, over my years of doing the work and knowing what it feels to be exiled in many, many ways, what I have learned is that we don't learn really from the things that are wonderful and good. We learn most from our mistakes and the mistakes of others. But the greatest teacher for me, in my I statement, has been my mistakes. Some of them I could reconcile. Some of them I could not. And I do need to be forgiven, but I also need to forgive. I need to forgive in the same way that I desire to be forgiven. But some of them just won't fix. Some people will go on into eternity and they have not been reconciled with you. And you may think, like I have thought, that when I said I was sorry, I was deserving of at least some forgiveness, only to find out that choice was theirs, not mine. And I cannot hold it against them. If I was wrong, I was wrong. They have to process it. What I can learn, though, is not to cause that same pain to someone else So it becomes a blessing. The experience is a blessing for the someone else going forward. Yes.
Thank you. Pam Rocker asks, when you are dealing with issues that affect the daily lives of LGBTQ plus folks, legislation, policy, etc., how do you approach the idea of compromise when you know that certain beliefs will lead to policies that are going to be death dealing? For example, trans people being able to use washrooms, discrimination against LGBTQ plus people in the workplace and in seeking housing.
Everything that you said, Pam, is absolutely right. How do you find compromise? And being a person who has been engaged in the work of civil rights, both in terms of trying to move people, not essentially to be prejudiced against people of African descent, people who are at our borders of Latinx descent, people who are LGBT, goes to the incredible fear of the unknown that many people have internally. I have found this to be true. The whole conversation about being a same-gender loving person, for a person who has not a clue as to what that reality must be, it suggests that those folks who don't have that clue in many situations are terrified. Terrified for very real reasons. And it has to be a terror because the percentage of people who are same-gender loving and transgendered and gender nonconforming and identify as bisexual and such in the world is a very small percentage of the human population. So it's not the fear of being overwhelmed by numbers. It is the fear of other things. It is the fear of unfeigned patriarchy. It is the fear, essentially, of parents not being able to live out their dreams in the lives of their sons who have become their daughters, or their daughters who have become their sons. It is the fear that the thing might be contagious and it might jump off on them. You know, there are just so many kinds of fears that people have. And what I had learned to do was do the work that is necessary over the years to love people, but not ever to let up on the importance of equality. For me as a woman, for me as a person of African descent, for me as a person who is same gender loving. There is no compromise in my thinking about equality, but there is a pastoral piece that is a part of what I am called to do. And I will take just this moment and say to you that when I came out, I was very distant in many ways from my mother. Both my spouse and I were raised in extremely conservative Pentecostal environments. And a long story short, there was a period of time my mother and I didn't have any communication at all. She wouldn't talk to me at all, no matter how much I tried to reach out to her. And I was praying one day, weeping and praying. And I said to God in my prayer, I miss my mother. And one word came into my mind, shopping. And I began to understand what that meant. A few Mondays after that, I called my mother in the morning, on a Monday morning. I said, Mama, I'm coming to get you. And she was, curt. She said, for what? I said, I'm coming to take you shopping. And she said, after a pause, shopping? I said, yes, I'm coming to take you shopping. To make a beautiful and long story short, I went and picked up my mother and began the first of many times that we went out shopping. She drugged me all around, all kind of different places. And we went shopping and I spent money and helped her shop. And we had a shopping good time. We didn't talk about anything except the clothes and the weather and some things about the family, but no heavy theological conversations, nothing about my being same gender loving, none of that. We just spent time. And then a little further down the line, she started to ask me questions. And I started to answer her as carefully and as truthfully as I could. And then one day my mother said to me in the middle of my conversation, she said, shut up, Yvette. I said, okay. And then I shut up for a minute, And then I came back and I said, so what is that about? And she said, if what you are saying to me is true, I have lived 60 some years of my life doing things that I did not have to do. And she said, you know, of course, that makes me feel like a fool. When my mother said that to me, I said that back to my mother, that what you just said is at the heart of many people who want to embrace folk the way you, Mama, want to embrace me, but you just don't know how. What is the path? And we found our way to each other. And I want to end this story by saying to you that my mother became my greatest champion. It was my mother who left her denomination and became a part of our fellowship. My mother was the mother to many whose mothers would not be mothers to them. My mother, my mother. And so the policies, I don't bend on the policies, but what I try to do is get in communication with the people who, out of their anger and their frustration, and when they're spitting forth these wicked things and trying to say them in the name of God, up under that, what I discern is the locus of their pain and their suffering, their family. Why do they care so much about this small population? Why do they care? What is the locus of that anger? And usually it is connected to some sort of fear or some sort of loss or some sort of reality for that person. And that's where we have pastoral care responsibilities. Yes.
Thank you. I love that story about your mother.
Mm-hmm.
I can relate. My mom and I love to go shopping together.
Shopping, that's right.
Yeah. So Eva Biederman is asking, people do change most often when they're heard.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any tips for hearing someone when their message is so radically different from your own, when common denominators are hard to find?
Active listening is very different than hearing what people are saying. Active listening does try to hear underneath what they are saying. I encourage that. It is finding what are the things that you do agree upon, right? Where are the connecting points? You know, there are things that mothers can talk about that only mothers can talk about. That's the truth. There are things that fathers can talk about that fathers can talk about. There are things that women can talk about. No matter how we identify as women, there's some woman things that we can talk about, and we do talk about. There are things that do connect us. Exactly how do you cook your greens? How do you prepare your chicken? You know, what is the best place to go to get a winter coat? There are things that we can talk about before we get to the things that we can't talk about. And I encourage us to be in conversation with people first around the things that you can talk about and establish relationships. And then I think we can find out how people came to conclusions about the things that are hard to talk about. And remember, what you don't want to do is go into that conversation with your intention to win them over to your side. Because that's not active listening. That's just still waiting for someone to get done talking. So you can work on them to change them. Go into the conversation being aware that they may not change at all. But you still may leave that conversation with a friend who agrees to disagree. That is not the worst situation to be in. I have a lot of those friends who agree with me on a whole lot of things that have to do with policy, but they don't put the toilet paper on the roll right, if you understand what I'm saying. We have things about which we do not agree, but there are many things about which we do agree. We are not our political party. We are not our denomination. We are not our race. That is not the bottom line. That is not really who we are. We are the people of God who each are fearfully and wondrously made. My friend said we are designers originals. She wrote a song, Danny Bell Hall. Designers originals, we're one of a kind, created by a master with one purpose in mind, to be the showcase of God's glory for the whole world to see, and an example of God's beauty as God shines through you and me. We are individuals. We have some, but not all, common denominators. And we can connect. We can agree to disagree, and we can move on to the next thing and still find enough people who are willing to change for us to be able to connect in the right places. Prima facie duty. Those of you that have done work in theological education, done work in social work, and done work in perhaps in nonprofit work, know that our prime duty, our first face duty, is to do no harm. That's what we hope to do, is to do no harm. And if we would just live that out, we would stop abusing children at the border. If we would live that out, we would make sure we're not passing the COVID virus. If we would live that out, we would study war no more. Our duty is to do no harm. That is our duty. So if that's helpful.
It's very helpful. There's a bit of a follow-up question to that, and then I'll move on to Greg's question. So when the hate that we're seeing in the world is so visceral and vengeful and driven by erasing the meaning of truth and compassion and rewriting our history, how do we fight for change but still love our enemies, aka what Eva asked?
How do
So I
we
don't know
fight
if there's
for
anything
change
additional.
and still love our enemies? And you know, I do a teaching sometime where I put 3 concentric circles. One in the middle I call society. The second circle I call religion, faith. The third I call the margins. And what I say is that we are often trying to pull toward what we consider to be the center, whatever the center is. And the center, people of faith would like to believe may be faith, but I have always found that society comes to certain conclusions before church, before religion. Religion sometimes picks it up as an afterthought a little later on. Essentially, for women's rights in the United States, the suffragettes did their fighting. And then religion said, oh, okay, well, all right, I guess we'll just have to let them vote since they won the vote. Okay, so as it relates to civil rights, and the rights for people of African descent in the United States, the greatest enemies to that reality were religious people. And so were many people who were considered non-religious because they weren't involved deeply in church, right? In church and faith-based organizations. They were the real harbingers of the push for civil rights, and continue to be, by the way, out in the street doing this work even now. And after a while, religion begins to say, oh, okay, all right. Well, my goodness, since they're making all that noise and carrying on, we may as well, you know, and the principal slaveholders in the United States were all Christians. They were either Methodists or Baptists for the most part. Christians, you know, the hard right in the United States, Christians, a lot of Methodist Christians, I'm telling you the truth. That is our reality. So it didn't come from church, it came from a societal decision. And then church sort of reluctantly came along after they had cast out leaders like Martin Luther King and John Lewis and others who came from faith but had to step into the world to do the work. And then after they did some work, the church came along later. Oh, I knew Martin when he was a boy. Well, you didn't even want to talk about him last week. So things shift and change. And so the reason I have a third circle that's called the margins, because these are where the people are who are either living with being on the margins or doing the fight for people on the margins. And I know I'm talking to people like that right now. You're in the struggle. Even if that struggle has not been your struggle, you have put yourself in harm's way. You have created a situation for yourself, with your family, with your job, because you have gotten under the load with other people and you're out there and you're seeking change, here's what I want to say to you, Chinook Winds. I want to say this to you today. We spend way too much time concerning ourselves with those two inner circles. One being all of the ways in which we are forced to have order in religion, and that order is not bringing about peace and power for the people who are the most ostracized, the most underserved, the least of these. And it takes a lot of time and money and energy to do church. I've been doing church all my life. And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of energy to do church. And we've been working at it, haven't we? Most of our adult lives trying to figure out some kind of way to pull it off, holding it together institutionally, right? But here's what I believe, and I may be a bit, but this is the time of COVID-19. So, this is a radical system, it's a radical time. What I think we need to do is begin to think about building church on the margins as versus trying to repair basically the institutions that take more money, more energy, and more time to keep them running than we really have money, energy, or time to do it. And I know that gets me in denominational trouble and institutional trouble, and because I'm a part of both. But I want to say it because I think what we need to do is start to build on the margins. That is all that Jesus did. He moved away from the harbingers of power in his time, and he went out into the suburbs and on the hillside, and he built something among those who were most marginalized by religion and society. And the Jesus that we're talking about right now on our Zoom and all our laptops and cell phones and all our technology, that Jesus was considered a wine bibber and a glutton and pulling people together and feeding them on the hillside with apparently good wine. He seemed to have been able to pull that off. What does it mean? What is the heart of what I'm saying to you? We need some courageous shifts and changes. And don't be afraid. You're more than an institution. Don't be afraid if God begins to call you to something that is in some way radical. Don't be afraid, even if you like me, 65 and older, don't be afraid of radical. You serve a radical Christ. And what Christ did in the person of Jesus was radical work. If we build something on the margins without fear, what will happen is the center of society and religion will start moving toward us because we're just having way too good a time. Trust me, having way too good a time out there on the margins. God has called us to be church. God has called us. I live in an earthquake zone. When we have really good earthquakes, the first thing to fall off are the facades, the things that really don't matter. And what remains is a good foundation, good internal structure, rebar, that holds us together. But all the junk and all the fluff, in the book of order and the book, the rules, where you have to go now to rule number 50.12 small a, in order to know what to do, those things sometimes will be lost in the shift because the players will change. Everything will change. Let the Holy Spirit send a wind for you. I don't even know the particulars, but I know the Holy Spirit. Send a wind for you and move you to establish what you have dreamed possible. God will. If we will, God will.
Wow. I can hear the voice of God calling us through your words. Thank you. And I know that that call will be something we spend some time this week and in the coming months, really thinking about as a region and as individuals.
Yes.
So Greg is asking, saying, I'm loving the gospel wisdom here. How do we decide when we need to work for compromise and when we're faced with the impossibility of trying to put new wine in old wineskins?
Mm-hmm. Not only is that a powerful question, that is the question for now. What happens when it is really time to stop putting new wine in old wineskins? And I think that in many ways, the reflection that I just shared with you speaks to that. That is a discernment that we have to come to. When is it time to stop building something whose foundation has already indicated that it's giving way? When is it time? I speak a lot and teach a lot in theological institutions, and I've said to people, we're coming to a time, and this gets me in trouble, where having people spend 3 or 4 years preparing for parish ministry is not really preparing them for parish ministry. There needs to be some concomitant something that goes along with that, some connection to a liberal arts opportunity where they can learn some other things. Because in my years, particularly my master's degree in seminary, nobody taught me about crack cocaine and how to manage homelessness and how to deal politically, how to write grants, how to manage in some way or other people who have mental and emotional illness. And now I am called to the urban centers. I am called to the third world of the United States, the urban centers. And I can tell you straight out, being able to choose which hymn is correct for this Sunday does not help me with those realities. We need to marry something else to those realities. We need degrees that are double-sided so that we can come together around the things that tell us which wine skins we can still really pour wine into. Or are we preparing for a world that was and not for a world that is? So that is a key question, a very important and valuable question, and something we need to think about, give some thought to, if we are truly going to be change agents and not people who are essentially feeling called to stand over and guard a graveyard. We have a fresh and living Christ and a fresh and living call. And I think we should be prepared for it. The reason why theological institutions, I think, are having some difficulty is because I don't think that what it is that the accrediting organizations that are requiring the schools to do is really preparing people to do what needs to be done. There are things that need to be done. And you have to have both sides of this reality working at the same time. Something where we have our hand on the theology and worship, but something where we have our hand on life and living and what it is that people are dealing with in the world that we are in. Yeah.
Well, I am so glad that our time with you is recorded because I know I'm going to want to go back and watch this. So you're saying so many things that are resonating for the time and place that we are. A couple of our ministry candidates are commenting about how your words are resonating for them with respect to preparation for ministry and theological school. So thank you for that. The next question we have is from Wilma Clark, and she says, I have a very hard time when I see people destroying and killing while protesting for change and something good. How can we, this is blocked out, for what we need to change for the better? My message is cut off there, but I think you can see it.
Yes.
We no longer
something
the message.
It says, when the world is so visceral and vengeful, racing, let's say compassion, rewrite. No, that's not it.
No, Wilma Clark.
So the full question is, I'm having a very hard time when I see people destroying and killing while protesting for change and something good. How
Yes,
can
sir.
we listen for what we need to change for the better when we might no longer be able to hear the message?
That is very powerful. And here's what I would say to you. When you plant a garden, it is nonsense to think that you will not have weeds growing with your plants, your flowers or your vegetables. They tend to grow together. And you have to be able to know the difference, and you have to be able to manage the difference. So when people are acting up in terms of what may be considered anarchy, there are people that go to the anarchy march, or go to the Black Lives Matter march, or go to the All Lives Matter march, or the Women's March, who are there because they want to break into a store and get a television. And they're there, they came out to the march for that reason. That is why they're there. They're not freedom fighters. They may have it written on their t-shirt, but it doesn't mean that that's who they are. But that does not negate the efficacy and the importance and the power and the statement of the march. There will be some anarchy surrounding any real fight for peace. Somebody is going to try to capitalize in this capitalized society and societies that we are in. Somebody is going to try to figure out a way to make Black Lives Matter t-shirts so they can make a bunch of money, and they're not even Black. Somebody is going to try to find a way to benefit from these events. But the question is, are we addressing the larger issue and the greater goal? And I can say to you that George Floyd would not have ever even been in the news. Do you know how many George Floyds we have had in the Black community? He would not ever have been, it would never have been on the news what happened to him. And if so, it would have been as fleeting as Breonna Taylor. Fleeting, if it had not ignited the march that it ignited. And then it ignited the march all over the world. Thanks be to God. To pay attention, to aggravate the atmosphere. And so when there are people that are there for violence, whether they are there to do something in the march to aggrandize themselves, if they are there because they want to create a war from race to race, from one situation to another, whatever they are there for, my heart says that had it not been for people who took to the street, there are some things that have happened in the recent past that simply would not have happened had they not done it. And I'm sorrowful that it took that. I'm sad. I am as sad as I have been in the past when Dr. Bethune-Cookman College in Florida, when the women suffragettes won the right to vote and the women marched, you know, they were incensed by the fact that Black women thought that they would be able to march. So the suffragettes who were pro-women were anti-Black. And Mary McLeod Bethune from Bethune-Cookman College in Florida got her young women and teenagers all dressed up and ready to go and vote, because if women can vote, she said, all women can vote, only to be turned away by women. You follow me? Turned away by women from the vote. What is sad about it is that there are times when we are at cross purposes, even when we feel justified, and that our side is right, whatever our side is. But we live to march another day. And we kept on marching until John Lewis and Martin King got to the Pettus Bridge and the Voting Rights Act was passed. And it didn't have color associated with it. Thanks be to God. We keep on moving until justice runs down like water. We keep on moving until justice outdistances anarchy. the kind of anarchy that destroys. Till justice outdistances racism, the kind of racism that comes to the march to make a race fight happen. We keep on marching. We keep moving. We keep doing it until things change. And I can tell you that those marches change things. I have seen laws enacted because of those marches, and we're not done yet. You're not done yet. The world is not done yet. We've got some more needs for justice warriors to be in the street, putting ourselves in harm's way, putting our money where our faith is, until justice really does run down like water. Yes.
Thank you. We have on our Whova platform another chat that you can't see. And Greg said, I shouldn't tell you that Calgary briefly had Black Lives Matter gelato.
I hope it was liquid flavored or something like that. Oh, wow. I mean, I'm not mad at you, Calgary, okay?
Well, maybe you should be, but.
No, I'm not mad at you. Somebody benefited, but at the same time, somebody saw it and saw the normalizing to some degree of the messaging. And so, you know what I mean? You know, is it problematic? Sure. You know, at the same time, is it getting the word out there? Sure. My prayer is that it is. There's a point at which we will level the playing field. It's going to happen. I'm so confident that if I am Irish and I am Cherokee and I am Igbo, if we just keep being together, pretty soon people will have prejudice against them because they have gray eyes or blue eyes, because you won't hardly be able to tell one of us from the other. At some point, we are going to stop subjugating people around race. It has to happen.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to give one last opportunity for folks if they've got questions or reflections that they want to share, to type those in the chat. Elizabeth Bennett is saying, love the analogy to a garden. I have weeds every year, but I still keep planting that garden and reaping a reward.
Yes.
And pulling the weeds.
Yes.
Thanks.
And they keep coming back.
Indeed.
And we keep pulling them. And such is the work of the church, right?
Right. Well, I'm still reflecting on your idea of building the church on the margins, and definitely want to be a part of that work. And I know that that's kind of what we're working towards here in this region. So really appreciate your words today. It doesn't look like we have any more questions, so I don't know if you have any closing words you want to offer, or if we can, if not, we'll just sign off for the day.
It's been my joy. I'm so glad to be actively involved and engaged with my kin in Canada, and looking forward to, when everything clears up and things improve, to some face-to-face opportunities to sit and talk and share. I know you have many things to share also with us in ways in which you are doing what you are doing, but I pray that you've taken encouragement and forward thinking from this conversation that we've had today and from our time of sharing, and just know that I look forward to sharing with you tomorrow as well. Blessings.
Thank you so much. And so we'll remind everyone that we're going to see Yvette 2 more times, and I know that you won't want to miss it. And if for some reason you do, we will have recordings, but really encourage you to be here and to engage with us in the next couple of days. Thank you so much for your time, for your words, and we bless you on your way this evening, and look forward to tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye now.
All right. Bye. So Helen, over to you.
There's no way anybody can follow that, is there? Really. That just powerful, powerful messages and words that are shared with us. And And hopefully as we all go to our evenings doing whatever we do, that some of those words will resonate with us. And the challenge is that being that radical, being on that outside vulnerable edge is what will draw other people to us. It's just amazing. So I do want to remind you that tomorrow we begin again with our opening worship at 9:30. So we would invite you to take this journey into Hoover again tomorrow. We will open the chat room. We will open the session at 9:20. You can be on there a little bit ahead of time, just knocking at the door, and as soon as we can open it, we will do that for you. And then take a look at the agenda that you had. It has a listing of what we're doing tomorrow, and read some of the stuff that you need to read. Our nominations close in about 10 minutes, so if you want to nominate someone or you want to stick your name in there somewhere, then you need to do that fairly quickly. There is a meetup tonight. Dave Pollard is reminding us that there's information in the community section of Hoover so that you can connect up with him. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and we have just a very short benediction for you. I'm sure you won't fight me if we leave this meeting 10 minutes early. Alan, do you have our benediction, please?
You can use those last 10 minutes to get your nominations form
who
in.
you are.
Alan, can you play that one more time, please?
Go forth, remembering who you are and to whom you belong.
Amen. See you tomorrow.
Bye, all.